Hey guys, Pie Guy Rules here, and no, this isn't the worst episode of Adventure Time review. This is a different Adventure Time episode review. The other one's coming, I promise, but I figured this was a little bit more urgent. See, the episode we're reviewing today is called Jake the Dad, and is the first episode to feature Jake's pups. Why am I reviewing it? Well, I think it'll have a lot of impact on the continuity of the show, and also, I've talked quite a bit recently about how adding a baby to a show can ruin it and can just make the show's focus completely switch to be about the baby, or just have every episode from then on be about the baby, or the episodes that were about the baby just end up being horrible, with the Fairly Odd Parents, or, with Rugrats even going back further, and it happens in live-action television shows too. Heck, it happened with Married with Children, and Seven wasn't even a baby. But regardless, I was hoping that Adventure Time would deal with this subject a little bit better than the rest of the shows that I'm used to. And, well, I don't know if it did. See, the episode doesn't go into much about the show's future. I mean, there's a line at the end, which I'll talk about when we get to it, that kind of talks about where the show's going to go as far as these things. But the questions that I had going in were like, well, what about the whole adventure thing with Jake? Because if Jake was off having adventures with Finn, wouldn't he seem kind of neglectful to his pups? And if not, well, no one wants to see Jake take care of his pups while Finn goes out on an adventure. It's adventure time with Finn and Jake. It's not adventure time with Finn while Jake takes care of pups. So I was kind of curious as to how they were going to handle that without making Jake look like a neglectful father, or without ruining the show, basically. And honestly, we don't get many answers, but we get a few, and the episode is definitely worth taking a look at, so let's jump right into Jake the Dad. So the episode starts out right after Lady Rainicorn gave birth to the pups, which is a good thing. Nobody really wants to see any birthing scenes in cartoons. Finn and BMO come over to get a look at the new puppies, and BMO, throughout this entire episode, acts like an excited kid to have either a little brother or have a dog. BMO throughout the series kind of has this childlike behavior to him dash her, because it's genderless, and it's kind of neat to see him dash her so excited and happy in this episode to kind of get either a new pet or a new sibling in whatever metaphorical child he is to Finn and Jake. The episode wastes no time in showing off Jake's 5 new pups. Charlie, TV, Viola, Kim Kil-won, and Jake Jr., who is a girl for some reason. I don't know why Jake would name a girl after himself, but whatever. Design-wise, all the pups look really cool, being a mixture of Jake's orange with Rainicorn's rainbow. Some of them have horns on their heads, some of them have horns on their butts. They kind of look like wiener dogs, and they're all kind of elongated, except for TV, who looks conspicuously like Poof. He's round and kind of purplish, but whatever. Overall, I like the designs. They're mostly very distinct, like there's one that's really long, like I said, TV is round. The only one that kind of bugs me is Jake Jr., whose face is like mushed in or something. I guess it's like kind of supposed to be one of those dogs with a mushy face, because its face is just kind of like wavy lines, and when it talks or barks or whatever, its mouth kind of opens up in a really weird way. Not necessarily a bad character design, it's just a little bit odd for my taste, but overall I really do like the design of these pups, or pupicorns, or Rainipups, or whatever you want to call them. So we see Jake being all proud of having pups, and Finn starts to play with them, but Finn's not very good at playing with babies, as he's crushing 2 of them and bashing the other 2 of them together. Jeez, Finn, they're babies, not action figures. So Jake decides that it's bedtime for the pups, and he tells Finn to kind of get out. He also kind of nervously mentions the fact that because he's a dad, he's gonna live with Rainicorn and the pups, and Finn should go back to the treehouse. Finn takes this really well, but in a way that you can kind of tell that there's something bothering him. You know he wants to stay with Jake. You know he doesn't want to be alone. You know he's gonna miss his best friend, but he's so happy for him. And in this just like little exchange, you can see their relationship and see how much Finn cares about Jake and his well-being, that he understands. And that's really cool. So Jake guards over his pups all during the night with binoculars and a sword in hand. I like the fact that the show kind of addresses the fact that it was probably a really awful place to raise a baby. Think about it, there's all sorts of monsters and bugaboo running around. It's probably not a very good idea to leave your babies unattended, even if it is nighttime. However, all that staying up is starting to get to Jake, but he gets up at 4:17 and starts making breakfast. He pulls out Mom's Manual for Raising Beautiful Babies, which I'm not sure if it's actually Jake's mom or if it's just kind of a generic guide that's for moms, but considering we see Finn in the hologram that's presented, which, by the way, the same hologram projector that's used in Dad's Dungeon, I assume it's their mother on the recording that has this guide, or maybe it's just represented that way. But anyway, he asks the guide how he should make breakfast, and he starts to make breakfast, and he goes checks on the pups, and he looks at them, and he's nervous, and he's like, huh. Kinda like dead people. And then gets a really nervous look on his face before going back to making breakfast nervously. And he's like, gotta be tough, gotta be a strong dad. And then he starts freaking out and goes over to the little guide and asks it, the babies aren't moving. And then the guide starts freaking out and is all like, they might be dead, perform CPR. And Jake goes over and starts blowing on all the babies, and the babies wake up and they're all disturbed. And I like the fact that it's kind of playing on a real fear. See, a lot of adults and parents have fears that the baby's, dead or something just because it's not moving, even though it's really just sleeping. And it's something that I can even relate to, not with a baby, but I have a cat who's getting older. And whenever I see him not moving, even though I know he's just sleeping, I check to see if he's breathing, and I make sure he's okay, because, it's a very real fear. And that's what I've always liked about Adventure Time. For as outrageous and out there of a setting that it is, and as weird things can happen on the show, a lot of the behaviors of characters and a lot of things that happen are very real and very relatable things. And it's still funny, too. That whole they look like dead people thing is a really funny line, especially because you know that the babies aren't actually dead, but it's kind of a strange observation that you think, but you know you really shouldn't make. It's very Hamlet-esque. The next day, we see the pups practicing their powers, of which they have many. Some of them can kind of shape change, they can all teleport, they can change the color of things. It's a little bit of a mix of Jake and Rainicorn's powers, but also a few weird ones thrown in there. We see that for a second, and then Jake says that the manual says that he should read them a book. And he decided to read him a book that he read as a child about a fox that eats babies. Jake starts reading the book until he realizes it's kind of darker than he remembers and not particularly family friendly, which is really funny and probably a commentary on the fact that a lot of popular stories and songs like London Bridge is Falling Down and stuff like that are very harsher in hindsight when you grow up and realize the real meaning behind them, or the real dangers of foxes that can actually eat babies, which is what the book is about. At the advice of the mother's manual, Jake throws the book outside, where, what else, but a fox finds it. And the fox is very similar to the fox from Storytelling, by the way. He goes back to his fox brother and is all like, hey, guys, there's this book about foxes eating babies. I betcha babies would taste good. They just sit there and stuff when you eat them, so let's try to eat some babies. Lady Rainicorn advises Jake to take the pups outside for some exercise. Jake does on leashes, which they all escape from, and because Jake's so tired, they all get away from him. When he finds them, one of them is playing with a sword, another one's playing with mushrooms, another one's dancing with a frog, and they're all out in the woods. And Jake even says it's every parent's worst nightmare, which is probably pretty true. If I had a kid and I found him playing with a sword, I would be a little bit terrified. Jake tries and fails to corral them all up, but Lady Rainicorn manages to do it just by calling all the babies inside. Jake's all exhausted and collapses outside, to which the foxes come along and say, hey, is that a baby? It's good enough, it may as well be a baby. And they drag Jake off, which is actually a nice subversion of the actual obvious plot that would be to have the foxes go and try to eat the actual babies. Jake exhaustedly tries to fight back, but fails, so the pups have to come to Jake's aid. And Jake Jr. says its first words, the manual's a bunch of junk, which promptly causes Jake to flash back to his first words, which were the same exact thing when his mother was using the manual to be afraid of a snake, which Jake fights off. Although, why was his mother referring to the manual that supposedly was her manual? Like I said, it looks like her in the picture of the manual, but why would she need to refer to it if she, quote-unquote, wrote or made the manual? It's like if I wrote a book and then referenced my own book in one of my writings, or was like, what would I do in this situation, and decided to look at one of my rants and say, hey, look, that is my opinion on the situation. But I suppose it doesn't actually matter whether it was Jake's mom who made the manual. Anyway, Jake realizes he's been overprotective because as a pup he was able to take care of himself, so his puppies will probably be able to do the same. The pups all spin around and then they get into this battle formation where all the pups are kind of sitting on one another into this giant body, and they pop Jake right into the middle. They swirl around and they make all the foxes change into bright colors and they blind them, and then they do a Tasmanian devil type thing, whirlwind, where they just spin them all around, and the day is saved thanks to the peppercorn quintuplets. Jake reconciles with the pups and apologizes for being such a jerk and not giving them any space to do their own thing, and then gives one of the best lessons of all time, that you should learn about safety by not listening to people who are safe and learning on your own. So, yeah, the moral of the episode is, again, a parody of morals, and in the fact that babies pretty much just beat up baby-eating foxes when, in reality, they probably would have been eaten by foxes. But hey, magical adventure show, so the moral kind of, in a weird way, works for the show. Jake goes back to the treehouse, where he finds Finn lying on the ground with BMO's controller in his mouth, while BMO's dancing on him and holding bread. Okay. Kind of looks derpy, and I kind of like how pathetic Finn looks. Almost like it's his first chance that he got to be left home alone and just lied there the entire day. BMO asks Jake if he ruined it, and Jake's like, nah, it's just the puppicorns age at a really fast rate because of rainicorns and stuff. And so one of them already has a beard by now, and that the pups really don't need him. In a kind of very sad way, he says that. And Finn's like, okay. And Jake's like, plus all my stuff's still here at the treehouse. And so Jake moves back in. So yeah, that's pretty much the episode. It's anyone's guess as to what the future of Jake's pups will be. For all we know, we may never see them again. For the most part, it looks like they're not going to be having any major impact on the basic premise of the show, which is good because you don't want to have these babies interfering with adventure. It's cool to have these characters on the side, and it's cool to have the development for Jake to have been a parent, but it's also cool that it's not a very permanent thing. Even though he's still their parent, it's kind of hand-waved at the fact that they can take care of themselves now, and they don't really need Jake, so Jake's neither neglectful nor ruins the show. So what did I think of the episode? I thought it was pretty good. I thought there were a few hiccups, it could have been a little bit better, but overall, it was pretty good. And there's little things like the fact that what all the pups say in Korean is actually mathematical when they're in their battle formation. I like the fact that the hat that Jake wore was very similar to the ones that Jake's dad wore. I like the fact that Jake's mom kind of made an appearance. And if you notice in the flashback, it looks like it's before the apocalypse, which I don't really know how that would be possible, but civilization looks to be there in some form. It was handled really well, probably one of the better handlings, and I guess it has the fortunateness of being able to be a magical show, so they can have the puppies just magically age up and be responsible for themselves. It's a little bit of a cop-out, but at the same time, it doesn't ruin the show in any way, so that's good. So, all in all, pretty decent episode. If you're into one of the more touching episodes of the show, if you're in for more emotion, a little bit more of the characters relating to each other, a little bit more about Jake, this is a good episode for you. If you wanted an episode that's just about adventure, this one's not very good for that. But if you're into the continuity and you really care about these characters in the way that I do, it's definitely a very solid episode and very good character development for Jake, and very maturity for Finn too, even. So I definitely say you should check it out. Alright, Pie Guy rules?